I'll kick off and anyone that joins can kind of join in. So thank you for joining us. I think everyone's got their cameras and microphones off. So if you can keep those off just while we have the talks from Pippa and Sarah, that would be great. So thanks for joining us for the BCO NextGen Leadership webinar. I'm Sarah Mitchell, Joint Vice Chair of the BCO Southwest Committee. And I'm joined by Pippa Savory, Holistic Mindset Coach at True Story Coaching, who's going to be talking to us all about imposter syndrome, how it shows up and how we can sort of perform to our best. And Sarah Trahair-Williams, who's going to be taking us through her career journey. So Sarah's an Associate Director at Cubex and is working on the Finzels Reach development, which is award-winning. I think we all are pretty aware of that. And is going to be taking us through the highs, the lows, and just giving us some great tips about how to ride any challenges that a career in construction might throw at us. So we're going to have those talks, and after Pippa's talk, we're going to sort of automatically be thrown into some networking breakout rooms. So you can put your cameras and microphones back on then. And we'll come back and hear from Sarah, at which point we'll turn all our microphones and cameras back off, and we'll finish the session with another breakout room. There's going to be an opportunity for Q&As after each talk, so yeah, please do get involved with that as well. Over to you, Pippa.
Thank you, Sarah. That sounded very complicated. Cameras on, cameras off. Thank you to the Southwest branch of BCO for inviting me to talk today. So as Sarah said, I'm Pippa Savory. I'm a holistic mindset coach and I work for myself under my company True Story Coaching. And today I'm here to talk to you about imposter syndrome. Is imposter syndrome a real thing? Do you even know what imposter syndrome is? I'm sure you would have at least heard of it. So I'm going to talk to you about what it is, some kind of archetypes around imposter syndrome and how we may be able to get hold of that. So I'll be with you for about 30 minutes and I'll be opportunity to ask some questions at the end. And I'll give you some contact details should you have any questions afterwards. So first things first, what is imposter syndrome? Well, I'm going to start off by asking you, and I can't see you obviously, but if you put your hand up, put 5 fingers up, and for each statement I make, I'd like you to put a finger down. So first things first, do you ever feel like your accomplishments have been through luck or by chance or because you know somebody, you've got a connection somewhere? Are you ever worried you're going to be exposed as a fraud in your job, that you don't really know what you're doing and someone's going to find out? Do you ever feel that somebody around you, a colleague, you may look at a colleague and think that they're more clever than you are? Do you find yourself terrified of making mistakes? And to the point where you over-prepare or maybe you procrastinate and you don't take action? And finally, do you ever feel like rationally you know X, you've achieved something, but actually inside you feel completely different? You feel like, why? So I wonder how many fingers you have down. I was expecting the cameras to be on, so I apologise, but I wonder how many fingers you have down. And those types of things I've talked about really relate to imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is one of those things where it's a real buzzword, and I feel like lots of people talk about it more and more. And is it really a thing, or do we make it a thing? So I'll leave you to decide on that, but I'm going to talk to you about what some of the symptoms are, and then you can see if any of that really resonates with you. So if you Google imposter syndrome, there are many explanations and descriptions about what it is, but in its simplest form, it's a state of being in fear of being found out as an imposter or a fraud in your job. So around 70% of the population suffer with imposter syndrome, and mostly women, in fact. And the latest study actually shows that between 9% and 82% of people suffer with imposter syndrome, which is the most ridiculous statistic I've ever heard because it's too broad. But what we do know is we have around 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day going through our mind. So if some of the stuff that I'm talking about today relating to imposter syndrome affects you, a large portion of those thoughts will be relating to, am I good enough? Am I supposed to be here? Should I be worthy of this? How have I achieved this? Am I going to get found out? And that literally does your head in. So if that's you, keep listening. It's most common in high performing individuals or high achieving individuals. And the theory behind that is when you're a high achiever or you've put yourself out there, there's actually more external evidence of your success. So of course, the risks are higher in terms of you feeling like you're going to be found out. So there's more pressure to live up to that externally. And it's really important to know as well that it's not, when you have imposter syndrome, it's not that you think you've never achieved anything, because you have days where actually you feel really good about stuff and you have days where you feel really low about things. So sometimes we can cope with it better than other times. And it's also really important to say that it shows up at any age, at any stage in your career. So you can be starting out as a grad or a school leaver or whatever, or you can be a senior director, and it doesn't discriminate between seniority, gender, age, academic achievement. Like I say, it's more common in females, but not exclusive to females. So how does imposter syndrome present itself? So I went through some of the things that were at the very beginning with your fingers, so you get a taste really for what it is. But what it really feels like is self-doubt, fearful of this being found out that you're not good enough to do your job, berating your performance. So you could deliver a really good performance, you could have a good meeting with a client, you could go home feeling like you've done a good job, and then in the next and you sometimes over prepare to mitigate this risk of failure, which I'm going to come on to in a moment. Hopefully my broadband is okay. It's come up saying my internet is unstable, which is the joy of living here. It's a nightmare, so apologies if it's a bit wobbly. So if any of those things sound familiar to you, keep on listening. However it shows up for you though, you'll know that logically there's evidence that you have achieved something and that you're feeling completely different, and it's irrational thinking. So even though you know those thoughts, logically you know those thoughts are irrational, they feel really real, and it's a very horrible feeling to have to deal with. So when we have these conflicting thoughts in our mind, so we know X, logically we know this, but we feel like something different, it's called a cognitive dissonance. And it's when you have conflicting thoughts in your mind and they make you feel really uncomfortable. And it's the same, you can relate it to the same thing as it's like binge drinking, for example. So we know the health evidence shows us that binge drinking is unhealthy and it's something we really shouldn't do, but it doesn't stop us doing it. So there's the evidence supporting health reports that binge drinking is not good for you, but we somehow convince ourselves that that is exaggerated in some way and that it's totally acceptable and we're young enough to cope with it. So we do it anyway because we've got logic one side and we've got thoughts and feelings on the other side. And this is also cognitive dissonance. And our kind of the logic sits here and our thoughts actually override the logic of where we kind of want to get to. So we do carry on with this drinking. And it's the same thing, like I said about, you might get great feedback. So there's the logic, there's the evidence, I've got great feedback, but then your thoughts come in and you convince yourself otherwise. So it's called cognitive dissonance. So when we're actually talking about imposter syndrome, generally it takes two paths. And you've heard me talk already a little bit about, you might over prepare or you might procrastinate, and they're the two main paths. So procrastination, if we take that first, we procrastinate because we fear that if we start something, we're going to get closer to failing to something. You may not even realize that you do this, and it may well be very buried in your subconscious mind, but you might stop yourself from doing something and procrastinating. Well, one of two reasons. One, you just don't want to do it because you don't like it and you don't enjoy it. Or secondly, what if I can't achieve it? I don't know how to start it. I don't know what I'm doing. And you get yourself in a right tiz and in this kind of whirlwind of thoughts going around and this inner critic coming in, and you don't even know where to start. So you just don't start and you procrastinate. But of course, the problem comes then that deadline is looming, and then you've got massive pressure on yourself, and you increase the stress and actually increase the chances of failing. So it's like self-sabotage. And even if we do achieve it eventually, it's short-lived, like I said earlier, because then we start thinking, well, I could have done better. And it just goes on and on. So the other path that we can take is perfectionism. And of course, that is when we over-prepare to mitigate this risk of something going wrong and trying to achieve the perfect outcome. But the problem with that is we never achieve the perfect outcome, because if we're in the mindset of imposter syndrome, we've never quite achieved. There's always something we could have done better. So in that case, trying to absolutely over prepare and be a perfectionist about it, that leads to stress, burnout, and it doesn't actually ever get you to where you want to get to. So both of those routes have this feeling of achievement, but very short-lived. And then we quickly discount those feelings of accomplishment and go back to those feelings of stress and anxiety and self-doubt and worry. So are you a procrastinator or are you a perfectionist? Do you recognize yourself in either of those descriptions? So where does this all come from? I talked earlier about cognitive dissonance, being those two conflicting thoughts in our minds. I got great feedback, but I'm still not good enough, those types of things. It's likely you've got some deep-rooted beliefs about yourself, and those beliefs normally come from two different areas. So we have societal conditioning and we have family conditioning. And at the moment, I would say societal conditioning, particularly still for women, but for everybody, it teaches ourselves and it teaches us to doubt our self-worth. And again, for women, and I talk from that place, one, because it's my experience, but also I coach women. So I get the feedback on it, but through the patriarchy, etc., that has created this area still. We're still in this space where women are having to work harder to feel as good as perhaps a man might feel. And I know that is a blanket statement and it's not true for everybody, but generally that's where we're still at. So if you're bold and confident, you're brash, if you talk a lot, you're a bit mouthy. If you stand up for yourself, you're too aggressive. We're still in that space a lot of the time. So these societal norms teach us, whether we know it or not, because it might be in our subconscious, to constantly be on our guard if we're feeling that way. We doubt our ability and we overthink everything. So we literally cannot get away from social media either. So that teaches us too about what we should be, who we should be, and puts even more pressure on us, even, rather than us just thinking, I'm okay as I am, thank you. It's a train going past colleges. So then on to family conditioning. And I'm sure most of your parents raised you as they thought fit, obviously. And they probably told you you're clever and brainy and you're smart and you're a good kid and all of those things, which is great. The only problem with that comes if that is the main messaging you're hearing as a child, you base your success on those things. So if you aren't achieving and if you aren't brainy and if you're not passing your exams the first time, then you kind of hang your success on that. So that then becomes a problem. Or if you're told, you know, you're handsome or you're pretty and all of those things, you also base your success on that. So when those things are in threat of being taken away, that also takes away some of our self-worth, which affects how we think, feel about ourselves. And then these inner critic, imposter syndrome feelings come in. God forbid we are just accepting ourselves as we are. And great, tell your kids that they're beautiful, and great, tell them that they're brainy, but it has to be a balanced message. And the feelings about ourselves and the self-worth come from within here rather than these external things that we're hearing, which is a whole other conversation. So internalize all of these beliefs that we're told as children, and they go into our subconscious minds. And these are some of the things that form our belief system that we don't even know that are in there, which affect how we show up at work, how we build relationships, and how we present ourselves, and how we put ourselves out there, and how much we feel we can achieve in our careers and in our lives. So we go out of our way to mitigate all of that, putting massive pressure on ourselves. So the impact of all of that is we can feel terrible. And I feel like this is like, I'm not like on a negative vibe here, but if you do suffer with imposter syndrome and these feelings, it is such a horrible place to be. And, you know, you feel really negative, it interferes with what you want in life. You don't go for the promotion because you don't want to draw attention to the job you're doing now, let alone the one that you actually want to go for, just in case you get found out or someone realizes you're not doing a very good job, or you don't want to draw attention to yourself. So you stay under the radar. And the problem with that is that you don't reach your potential because you're staying small, you're keeping yourself invisible because you don't want to draw that attention, like I say. We don't ask for that pay rise because we don't think we're worth it. And then we procrastinate, we don't take action, or we overcompensate and we kind of lead to burnout. So there's 5 types. I've talked about perfectionism and procrastination. There's actually 5 identified archetypes of imposter syndrome. So I'm going to run through them with you really quickly, and you tell me, well, I can't hear you, but you tell yourself whether any of this resonates. And it doesn't have to be that you're just one. You could actually be a mix of a few of them. I think I'm about 3 of them I can relate to at some points in my career. So the first one is the perfectionist, which we've talked about. So you micromanage. As a leader or a person in business, you might micromanage. It might be your team, a project. You find it really hard to delegate, and you beat yourself up if you don't achieve the goal. And often it's a goal you set yourself, and often it's unrealistic. So that's a perfectionist. And of course, as we've talked about, you go out of your way and overcompensate to try and mitigate any risk of messing stuff up. Then you have the expert. So continually learning, reading books, podcasts, webinars, and you're striving to know everything about everything, because until you know everything and you're an expert in everything, who are you to be talking with authority? So you never feel like you know enough, despite probably being qualified or being in your profession for a decent amount of time. The next one is the soloist. And if you're a soloist, you really like to work, guess what, on your own. So you like to work on your own. You think teamwork's quite difficult for you, and you want to prove that you're competent yourself in your own right. So you tend to go it alone. Either that or you don't like your colleagues, I don't know, but you tend to go it alone. The next one's the natural genius. So having a mentor is unnecessary to you, or a coach is unnecessary to you. You already think you're absolutely competent. However, you quickly feel shame if you lose confidence if something goes wrong. And shame and lack of confidence, again, are difficult things to deal with. And then there's Superwoman, and I can definitely relate to this over the years. So you have absolutely find it impossible to relax. You can't relax. And actually relaxing for you is hiding away in a room somewhere so your family don't complain at you and you are still busy working away. And that for you is relaxing. And actually over the years, you've probably let your hobbies go. So how do we fix all this stuff? So I have this magic pill. It's 50 grand each. Just give me your bank details. It'll be good. No. So actually how we fix it, it's not easy. You know, it's not for the faint hearted. the first thing is recognizing that actually you may have some of these symptoms, and that's a really good first step to acknowledge it, because if we don't acknowledge something, we can't change it. You could, when you hear the voice coming in and starting to criticize yourself or berate yourself or think you've got to overwork or overcompensate, you're not worthy, I'm going to get found out. When you hear that coming in, you could acknowledge that that thought is there. And you could also give it an identity. You could think, okay, here comes Pippa, the imposter. Here she comes. And normally you could recognize, if you become very aware, you'll recognize that there's similar circumstances where this creeps into your mind. And you could think, here she comes. I'm going to say hi. I'm going to acknowledge you're there. I'm going to look for the evidence. I'm going to thank you for trying to bring that to my attention, and I'm going to send you on your way. And you have to practice doing this stuff, by acknowledging, giving it an identity, and actually watch in your mind this kind of, you could give it some kind of image, watch it walk away and get smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes until it disappears, and manage it that way. And like I say, this takes practice. What doesn't work is just trying to snap yourself out of it, because it will work for a nanosecond and then it comes back. So you have to do the mind work, and you have to repeat and practice. So yeah, name it, tell it to go away, acknowledge it. Another thing you can do is use this exercise called a thought ladder. So what you could do is, the first step is you think of a scenario that you have in your mind that you don't like, something that keeps coming up for you. So, I don't belong here. I don't deserve this job. I'm going to get found out. Whatever it is you're thinking, just acknowledge that, think about it in your mind, and then think of a scenario that's like a real goal, like an aspiration of where you would like to get to. So I can achieve anything I put my mind to. I'm worth an extra 20 grand, whatever it might be. So think of that goal that you really want to get to. And it might feel out of reach right now. It might not sit well with you, but that's good, because that means there's growth involved here. So think of a goal that's a real stretch goal. And then step 3, think about 3 scenarios that can get you closer to that goal. So they're better and bigger than the first one, that awful limiting belief that you're telling yourself, but they're not quite as big and bold as your goal step. And think of 3 scenarios and 3 real life things that you can evidence that have happened. So it could be something like, I have passed the next stage of my qualification. It could be, I got some really great client feedback. It could be, I'm working really well with my team at the moment. So think of something that's actually 3 scenarios that you can evidence that are better than your limiting belief, but not quite as big as your goal step. Write them down, write them on your laptop, or put them on a Post-it note if you're old school like me, or write them in your phone and practice them again. Mindset work takes practice. Practice them. Look at yourself in the mirror, read them out loud, read them in your mind when you're commuting, if you're doing that again yet. Look at them on your phone, practice thinking them and feeling them. That's really important. Don't just read this stuff. It's not just logical, it's an emotional thing. Where in your body do you feel it? Keep practicing these things. And the more comfortable you notice you're getting with them, replace them with something that's even closer to that goal step. So replace them again, 3 new ones, or replace one by one. Keep practicing and make it something, maybe even put like a reminder on your phone every morning and think, that's what I'm doing. 8 a.m. every morning, comes up on my phone, practice my goal steps, and then keep moving them till you get closer to your goal. So to help you identify more closely which archetype you are for your imposter syndrome, if any of this resonates with you, and also specific things you can do relating to that archetype, I have put together a workbook that you are very welcome to have. So if you would like a copy of that, let Sarah know or Bryony know, or email me hello@truestorycoaching.com, or DM me on Instagram, Pippa Savory Mindset Coaching, and I will happily send that over to you. And there's even more information in there. I hope some of this has helped you today to understand a bit more about what imposter syndrome is, but know that you're not alone in it. If you feel it, you're not alone. It is so common, and it is something that we can get under control and turn around going forward. So there are things you can do, like I've talked about, and also some stuff in my workbook. I did say to Sarah that I have got just a 5-minute mini meditation for you to do, which is something different maybe for a Thursday afternoon, and something different for a BCO webinar, I'm not sure. But I am holistic mindset coaching after all. So it's 5 minutes and it's related to what we've been talking about. So bear with me, and we'll get going on that just for a few moments. And hopefully you will enjoy this. And then I will hand you back over to Sarah or Bryony. So get comfy if you're not already, sit down. And I invite you to close your eyes and focus on your breath for a moment. And as you focus on your breath, let your shoulders relax. Take a deep breath in and sigh out, and relax your shoulders even more as you do that. And a big deep breath in, hold in as much as you can, and out. Now I'd like you to imagine a ball of beautiful golden light above your head. And this light is full of healing energy. And as you breathe, this healing light gets bigger and bigger until it surrounds your body. And this beautiful golden healing light is going to absorb anything you are currently carrying around with you emotionally. Perhaps some negative feelings around work, some stress you may be experiencing around personal or professional relationships, any concerns about your job or your studies. Whatever comes to your mind, this light is absorbing all of the emotions that come with the weight of those thoughts. Any negative emotions, thoughts, or physical tension in the body is being absorbed by this beautiful golden light. Watch these negative emotions being sucked into this beautiful light. The ball is so elegant, it's so unassuming, and it holds such power. So as you watch all of these negative emotions you might be experiencing, they're being vacuumed into this ball of light. And the ball gets small, gets smaller and smaller. Really small until you watch it shrink smaller and smaller until it's the size of a pinhead. And then it disappears. Now take another deep breath. As you breathe in, imagine a ball of brilliant white light coming from your core. Every time you breathe in, this light gets brighter. And every time you breathe out, this light expands. The light is getting brighter and expanding until it fills your entire body. It's all around you. And this light is full of nothing but positive vibes and energy. It's a renewed source of energy, confidence, and self-belief. You are now surrounded by this beautiful, brilliant white light. This light is your energy. You created this. It is you. It's your potential, and it's everything you need to achieve everything you want. It helps you accomplish your goals. and show up as the intelligent, confident person that you are. When you have moments of self-doubt, close your eyes for a few seconds and remember your light. It's always inside you, you just have to find it sometimes. Now, when you're ready, start to wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring your attention back into your room or wherever you are. And know that you have everything you need within you, always.
I think everyone's slowly coming back in. So once we've got everyone, just pop your cameras and microphones off, and over to you, Sarah.
Hiya. So thank you very much for inviting me along to this. I think it's one you certainly feel like you have imposter syndrome probably on this when you get asked to present in such a talk. So certainly Pippa's was quite interesting for myself as well. Very topical. So I'm an associate director at Cubex. Which I realised that in terms of the audience, it's a little bit broader than just the Bristol here, with the BCO being opened up to the nationwide. So Cubex are a Southwest developer. We've done a lot of work in Bristol that we're known for, but we've got some projects further afield that we've been doing. Finzels Reach is our most famous, which is multi-award winning regeneration of the city centre, which is now largely quite a good business district, central business district in Bristol. We've got, we ourselves have done quite a few of the offices down there, notable tenants of Channel 4 and EDF. And on our Halo scheme that we're building out right now, we've got Osborne Clark, local lawyer, who are on the scheme. And one of the things that's sort of most important to us is the placemaking and the creation of communities. But what I'm wanting to talk to you about is less about Cubex and more about my journey. And I think that probably the one take home I could say would be that your career is probably like most construction projects, in that you will get a lot of challenges along the way, but actually it's just rising up and dealing with them. And I think if you get a challenge, it makes you stronger, and everyone learns from those events. And if everything was plain sailing, which I don't think any construction project is plain sailing, then where would you learn from? So like I say, I've been at Cubex now for over a year, but I've had most of that year in lockdown. So that's one challenge that you have. But if we cast back to the start, when I was probably about 15, 16 and wondering what was I going to do, I always thought I was going to join the army, and that was largely to join the army and probably go down the engineering route and come out and do project management. That was probably something in my head of what I thought I would want to do, but it certainly was at 16. It was go into the army, get my degree first of all. So I was sponsored through sixth form and university by the army. Unfortunately, for reasons not necessarily my fault, I wasn't able to join. And that was probably my first hurdle in terms of knowing that what you start out thinking you're going to do as your path isn't necessarily going to be the path that you take. Doesn't make it any less meaningful or anything, and doesn't mean you can't achieve what you want to do in life. So I graduated from my first degree, which was in architecture. Again, chose that route largely because project management didn't exist at the time. It wasn't as prolific as it is now. It wasn't a recognised career. Most of it was actually the architects were the project managers, and obviously there's now quite a clear discipline of project management But come 2006, 2004, 2005, when I was looking at what degrees, that wasn't really an option, and it probably wasn't something that is well publicised. And if anyone is a PM or in a discipline where you think you wish you knew about it at school, I would recommend really go back and talk to your school, and encourage people to come into the industry if you think it's good. So I came out of my degree in 2009, which is sort of, aside from the recession that we are in now or will be in once government support stops, that was a pretty big recession that we were in. And I can always remember sitting in a talk in my final year with our head of year, where they said this time last year we had about 40 job offers, and this year we've got none, or we've got one, and that was sort of a stark realization at actually what the job market was there, and if I wanted to progress and to get any job, let alone one in construction, then maybe I needed to look at something else. So I looked at what my options were at the time, and education was probably the best option for me, just because there wasn't a market at all. It wasn't one where you could go and get work experience, because actually a lot of practices were shutting down, or significantly reducing their staff because they didn't have enough work. So it wasn't a case of go and get some work experience and it will recover in a couple of months. It was very much, no, this is a long-term look at what you're doing. So I went and looked at what other degrees there were, and I'll be honest and say that I really like sport. So actually Loughborough was always a university that I would love to have gone to had they done architecture. And when they did a commercial management and quantity surveying degree that was fully sponsored by a consortium of companies, and therefore meant that actually you also got given the opportunity to get a job, that was sort of ticked quite a few boxes. And so I took that option. It was one that for me, I could see it as being the slightly more practical side than the architecture perhaps was. And that suited me as a personality, and my skill set. So with that, like I say, it was sponsored by a consortium of construction firms, and not being one who really wanted to go and do another full-time degree, I did phone all of those construction companies who offered me sponsorship and asked them if they would take me in a year with a master's degree instead. And actually they all said no, do the undergraduate, because one, you get the work experience, and two, you need to we can't guarantee you the job in a year's time, because the market is so bad. So it was sort of that, okay, I've had one knockback with the army, right, let's move on and look at something else, and also coming out with this recession. But there was an option for me, and actually in the grand scheme of things, doing another undergrad wasn't the end of the world, because I was learning more, and I was furthering myself, and learning new skills. And so for me, that was the right opportunity to take. It also meant I could go and spend some time playing hockey, which was also great. So yeah, it was making sure that I made the most of my opportunities and not wasting the time. So I was sponsored by Sir Robert McAlpine, and was given work placements in my summer years, and also an industrial placement, and that just sort of stood me in really good stead to understand what life was like working for a contractor, and working in that environment, which is really good for a solid grounding in, even if you chose to go client side or not, you understood what the contracting environment was. You were based full time in a site cabin, which is very different to if you sit in the client side and sit in the office all the time, and you understand that relationship on site and the relationship with subcontractors and how things work. So I would always encourage someone to go and work for a contractor, if you are client side, because actually you're just broadening your career. And in that role, I was doing obviously a quantity surveying degree, so actually that was the route that I took. I was a trainee QS for McAlpines, and then off the back of that, when I was in a position to graduate, I had quite good grades, and I'd always wanted to do project management route, like I say. So it was one of just looking at and seeing, well, I'm at another point in my career where I can work out what is the right opportunity to do. And so with that, I had a look around, and by then project management was actually quite a strong discipline. It was still largely done by, actually, rather than the architects going into project management, it was actually tended to be the QS. So those who had done that degree, it was quite a strong route, because again, I think the project management degree route was less prevalent in the market, and fewer people had taken it up. So there was a lot of the switch was from those in the QS role, and probably because of the contract side of things, and how much you have to do with that with a QS degree. So I then had the choice of, do I go contracting side and stay as a QS, or do I switch and take the gamble and go and do the project management route, and that would be on the client side, primarily because the project management route on the construction side tended to be civil engineering, those graduates. So it was really sitting there and weighing up the options, and I wasn't afraid to ask the people who I had as contacts. So I spent a lot of time speaking with the commercial manager at McAlpines, and speaking with others in the PM side of things to work out what the right option was. So I would say, if you are faced with options of career choices, speak to those who are offering it to you as well. Don't be afraid to run through and have a clear plan of what your goals are. So I had quite a sort of clear idea of what I wanted to do, what sorts of projects I wanted to work on, and what my involvement was within them. And that really helped me to guide my path. It wasn't a split-second decision, so don't worry and think, oh, I'm under pressure, I've got to respond within an hour. I think we're all of the mindset now that an email comes in and you have to respond to it straight away, and actually sitting back and reflecting, I didn't have that issue. I could have a look and I could have a proper think. I didn't take months, don't get me wrong. I probably took a couple of days or a week or so, and spoke to those who I trusted to help with shaping my opinion. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, it was still my decision at the end, and my opinion. I could know whether it was the right move for me, and I could have taken the role and it'd be the wrong move, and that's fine, because you still learn from it. But it was one for me that actually going into project management was great, and that was the right opportunity for me. And where I sit today, I'm now in the property developer side of things. So I've moved from doing the pure project management, where I'm the interface between the client and the contractor, and now I am the client. But I'm also looking at the client from a more commercial mindset, perhaps, than if I was an institutional client. So say a client at a university, where actually your driver might be more academic and what the academic facility is needed. Actually, ours is more looking at what the site is and what that area needs, which is perhaps a slightly more holistic view on where we could go with things. And again, it's not something. My first degree was in architecture, and actually, when I look back at where I am now and what I'm doing, it's not a wasted time, because I've learned those basics of design, but I also understand the process that the architect has to go to. So I've got an empathy with what they're doing, and I understand the broad brush principles, but it's not the thing that I'm doing right now. And taking the route to go into property development side of things and take the jump to be on the client side, again, that's different to what I've done, but it doesn't mean that that's wrong or right in any way. And I think like the big challenge, like I said at the start, is the fact that actually I've joined a new company and then gone into lockdown, and I'm sure I'm very much not the only one, and there are probably a few people on this call who've done the same thing. And you've then got to be able to stand up and prove that you can do this job even when you're all at home and you can't see your colleagues, and you're learning a new company. But it's all of those things that actually that are there, and that you can learn from. You'll know how to do things better the next time. And I think I just sort of recommend to everyone of, if your path doesn't seem that clear right now, and I've had moments in my career, and I'm sure I will soon, will going forward as well, where I've sat there and gone, I feel like I'm going backwards. I feel I don't know quite what I will be doing next, and I'm stalling, and actually a couple of months down the line you look back and you laugh. Like me and my wife, there's one particular moment that we both look back on having a very clear recognition of having that conversation, and actually we look back on it now and we laugh, and we sort of, I think she takes the mick more from me. So I would say just don't panic if you're in a situation, but also if you get given an opportunity, take it. And I think where Pippa was saying on the imposter syndrome of oh, you might be in a position where you think it's luck that you've got something. I very much say in some of how I've progressed in my career, it is luck, but it's luck that I've been given an opportunity and then I've taken it. So that would be my one sort of final thought to everyone is if you're lucky enough to be given an opportunity, whether that's luck or not, people tell me off, take it, and that would probably be the one lasting one is yeah, take every opportunity you have, and if it's an opportunity to learn and progress, take it, and if your path has to divert slightly, you might still look back on it and find that it's still okay, and you still got to where you wanted to be, or where you wanted to be might not have been where you thought it was, but it doesn't mean it's all bad. So I had 15 minutes of slot, so hopefully Sarah's not going to tell me off too much.
No, we've got a couple of minutes, so if anyone's got any questions, either sort of pop your video on or pop it in the chat. But thank you, Sarah. I think that's really relevant, especially with everything that's going on at the moment. And I think, you know, when there are things like job cuts and recessions and like COVID, it is the kind of people that are coming up through their careers that are more affected or more vulnerable to those kind of shake-ups. So that's really interesting. I guess my only question would be, because you've worked, you know, contractor side, consultant side and client side, as a contractor, we're always trying to sort of recruit more women, especially into like QS, PM roles, and we really struggle. And I work with a lot of clients that are women, but it's really hard to recruit them contractor side. Having worked both sides, what do you think it is that, you know, are the obstacles to that?
I think first of all, it's actually publicising what we do in construction. And I think one thing that we're probably all really guilty of is the fact that when you walk past a site, you don't see women. And it's something that I'm trying to be a lot more proactive on, is actually pushing myself out. But as a female in construction and what we do, I find construction fascinating, and I think I put a post up the other day about the steelwork going up, and it just looks like a giant Meccano set. And if you grew up as a child playing with Lego, playing with Meccano, or painting or crafting of any sort, we just forget that skill. And I think a lot of people have in lockdown gone back to doing those skills, I being one, and actually how do you use that, and maybe it is the case of actually some of those things that the likes of Lego and Meccano, why don't we talk to them and sort of try and publicize what we do? So actually when you get a box of that as a child, put in some company names and say, look, come and talk to us, this is what we do, and let's make our industry more interesting. Because actually people walk past sites and all they see is hoarding. They quite often don't see anything interesting on that hoarding aside from some graffiti that is not the graffiti as street art, but is someone's tagged it, and we don't take pride in the process. We take pride in the end building, and we're really good at showing that off, but we don't show what we're doing. And I think actually we just need to encourage people to see what we're doing. And I love being on the client side for what I get to do in the front end, but I always want to walk around sites, and that's been one of the hardest things, because you see the thing being built, and it's the craftsmanship that goes into it and the skill. I think we just need to show it more. It's probably the be all and end all of it, and I don't have the answer as to how we do it, but social media has to be something we use, and maybe, I don't know, maybe Sarah Mitchell TikTok is going to explode, and you'll be wowing people, but we've got to come up with something that is probably better than Bob the Builder, and that we don't put a face to it. So,
yeah. No, that's a great point. I think we've pretty much run out of time, and Brian is probably going to throw us into a breakout room. But if anyone else has got any questions, just drop Brian an email. She's put the address in the chat bar, so happy to get back on any of those. Thank you, Sarah.
No problem. And if anyone wants to reach out on LinkedIn and ask any questions, then do feel free.